Well, thank you for joining us on the Broken Vessel Perspective. I am in beautiful Oak Bowery, Alabama. It's about 20 miles, I guess, outside of Auburn. I'm at Oak Bowery Methodist Church. It's a great little church. I actually have had the opportunity to come to church here, and great people, and just a beautiful area. And I decided I'd stop here on their little gazebo, their picnic tables, and to shoot a video. I want to talk to you today about mistakes, especially big mistakes. Our mistakes in life can affect us not only physically and mentally and emotionally, but especially spiritually. And sometimes we let mistakes affect us more than what they should. Sometimes we let them really take us down a dark road spiritually, maybe even mentally and emotionally. I've served for quite a few years as in the field of mental health as a psychologist, and I can't tell you how many people that I have worked with that are stuck in some mistake that they made in the past. They can't get away from it. And I want to share just a little bit of testimony, a little bit of my experience, because I've made a lot of mistakes in life. In 1988, I was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. And me and a friend of mine, we decided to go to Live Oak to meet some other guys to go to the Suwannee River to go swimming. Now, me and my buddy, we stopped at the liquor store on base, and we bought a bunch of beer. I had a little Nissan hard body truck. We loaded it up with beer, and we took off. We got to Live Oak about 2 o'clock, and we hung out on the Suwannee River that day. We left there that night probably about 11 o'clock at night. We had been drinking all day. It was a very, very bad mistake to get behind the wheel that night, but I did. And I got on 10. I was going down 10, almost to Jacksonville, matter of fact, almost back to the base, and I was going too fast. I lost control of my little truck. It ran off into a ditch, and I was stuck. I couldn't get out. Well, it just so happened a passing motorist called the state trooper and made a phone call to the state trooper, I guess, division or 911 or whatever. And a few minutes later, a state trooper showed up. Well, I was given a roadside, the DUI test, standing on one foot, saying your ABCs, all that stuff, and I failed it, and I was arrested. Well, I was taken to the Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida, the Duval County Jail, and the Duval County Jail is not a place you want to go to. I was 20 years old, in the military. Man, that place was just overpacked that weekend, I remember. Matter of fact, it was so packed that they had a place called the Bullpen, and it was like an auditorium room, and it had bunks stacked on each other, two bunks to a row, and probably a couple of hundred in there where they were just saying, "Hey, go find an empty bunk, and this is where you're going to be staying." And so it took about two or three. When you go to jail, you have to process in. They don't just go throw you in a cell like they do on Andy Griffin's show, but they took me and they processed me in, fingerprints, all this other stuff. And while they were processing me in, it was probably by that time about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, they gave us an orange to tide us over to breakfast. Well, to make a long story short, I had been charged with DWI and I think reckless driving or something like that. I can't remember, but I was in jail and I was going to try to use the payphone. There was a payphone that there was a line, and by this time it's probably 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I am in line in front of a guy who turns around and he demands that I give him that orange. Now, I didn't want the orange per se. It wasn't that big of a deal. I could wait till breakfast. I mean, breakfast was only going to be in another hour or two. But just because he demanded the orange, and just because he was so adamant and in my face about getting that orange, I said no. Well, that led to a scuffle, and we ended up getting into a little fight. It was broken up, but it really caused a lot of heartache on my part as far as staying in jail a couple of extra days. I was also I caught a charge on that as well. And so I was in jail there in the Duval County Bullpen for about 3 days in the Duval County Jailhouse. And man, it was a rough time. And I ended up getting charged with DWI. They dropped the reckless driving. I didn't get charged with anything with the little scuffle that we had in jail, but that was enough because it affected me in a lot of ways. I was actually supposed to be on duty that Monday, and I didn't get out of jail till that Monday. And so I was actually AWOL for about 9 hours. It was actually a double jeopardy type thing. I I had to go to court. I lost my license for 6 months. I had to pay a $437 fine. I remember it well because I didn't have $437. Um, I think I had. I think I lost my. I was on probation for 6 months. It was a terrible time. And when I went through that process, then I was sent to Captain's Mast. Now, Captain's Mast in the military is an Article 15. That's where you go before your commander or your captain or whoever, and they usually sock it to you. You're in trouble for some reason. So I'd already gotten in trouble with the law out in town. I was on probation, had lost the $437, had lost my license for 6 months. I was actually driving a 10, or I wasn't driving, I was riding a 10 speed. I'd gone and bought a 10 speed off base so I could get around base. I was either jogging or riding a 10 speed. And so I had to go to Captain's Mast. I never will forget, I went to Captain's Mast on my birthday, the date of my birthday in 1988. And so I was nervous as I could be, standing at parade rest outside the captain, the skipper's door. And I think he made me wait out there about an hour. He probably knew I was nervous as a cat. And finally, he calls me in, and I'm at attention. I go to parade rest. My master, this master chief, is with me. And I go to parade rest, and I never will forget, the captain looks at me and he says, "Grizzard," he said, "did you just make E5?" And I had just made E5. The list had just come out, and I had found out I had made E5. And I said, "Sir, yes, sir." And he just laughed and shook his head, and he said, "No, you didn't." Well, anyway, to make a long story short, I ended up getting in trouble off base. I lost about $350 they took out of they took out of my military paycheck. I was also I didn't make E5. I was on a suspended bust, which means that I kept my rank of E4, but I had to keep my nose clean for 6 months. The hard part was I was put on restriction and extra duty for 30 days. And man, let me tell you something, that was tough. Being on restriction in a barracks for 30 days is no joke. But I tell you, after that happened, I didn't get kicked out of the military. That was back in the days to where, I don't know how it is now, but I survived. And I had a LDO, I had a lieutenant, and I also had a master chief that went to bat for me. I was a good troop, did good on my PT test, was always, high speed, low drag, and they had really gone to bat for me, so I didn't get kicked out. It was a hiccup. But that really, really bothered me, not only physically, because it took a toll with all the money that I had to pay, not to mention my insurance going up and everything else, but it took a toll physically, it took a toll mentally, it took a toll emotionally. I mean, I thought about that a lot, but it especially took a toll on me spiritually. Mentally and emotionally, it took a toll on me because for years I thought that I thought my life was tarnished. I thought, although I stayed in the military, although I continued to make rank later on, I lived it down, I was able to move forward, but in my mind, it really, really created some problems. And I thought, how can I ever live past this? I'm never going to make it to here or to wherever I thought I was. And spiritually, at that time, I didn't know the Lord as my Savior. And a couple of years later, I actually gave my life to Christ, and I was straightening out my life. And it was like the devil was using it. He was saying, there's no way that you can serve God. There's no way that you can be a person of faith. You've got that DUI. You remember how it was, and you remember what you did, and you're a terrible person. I struggled with that for years. I actually struggled with that for probably 8 or 9 years. I ended up getting out of the military. I ended up going to college and getting a commission and going back in the military. But the entire time I was going through ROTC, I just thought that as I was getting a commission, I just thought for sure that was going to come back and it was going to haunt me. There was no way I could get a commission. I would probably never be able to get a job. And I was just thinking the worst. I look back now, and it was a hiccup, and it was a terrible mistake that I made. But life wasn't over. And sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes they're big mistakes. But you got to just lift your head up, and you got to keep moving forward. Sometimes we make big mistakes, and we think that that's the end of life as we know it. We think that it's just absolutely done. It's messed up our future. But what you've got to do when you make a mistake, and I've made a lot more mistakes. I could sit here and share for another 10 or 12 hours on all the mistakes I've made since 1988. But on each mistake, I've learned that you have just got to suck it up and you've got to deal with it. You've got to give it to the Lord, and you've got to let God use it. And that's where I come up with the thought that I have, is that God uses every experience in your life. I don't care if you've been to prison. I don't care what you've done. I don't care where you come from. God uses every experience in your life, both good and bad, to make you who you are today. And God uses those experiences. If you'll give them to Him, He will glorify Himself through you today. There's someone out there that probably needs to hear your story. There's someone out there today that needs to hear the mistakes that you've made. And they need to hear the hope that you have and how you've gotten through it. But hopefully that'll encourage you. I make a lot of mistakes still today, and I just try to pick up the pieces and move on. I mean, each decision and each consequence that we endure is another piece of the puzzle that we're putting together through life. And so I hope you have a great week. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.